by way of advice in young people, high school students, college students entering this world full of automation, full of these complex labor markets and markets, period. What kind of advice would you give to that person about how to have a career, how to have a life they can be proud of?
Yeah, I think, this is such a great question. I don't, it's okay to quote Steve Jobs, right? um,
Always.
yeah, I mean, and I just heard this recently. It was a commencement speech that he gave, and I can't remember where it was. And he was talking about, he had famously dropped out of school, but continued to take classes, right? And he took a calligraphy class, and it influenced the design of the Mac and sort of fonts, and just was something that he had no sense of what it was going to be useful for. And his lesson was, you can't connect the dots looking forward. Looking back, you can see all the pieces that sort of led you to where you ended up. And for me, studying truck driving, I literally went to graduate school because I was worried about climate change, and I had a whole other dissertation planned, and then was driving home, and I had read about all this management literature and sort of how you get workers to work hard for my qualifying exams, and then read a popular article on satellite linked computers. And the story in the literature was sort of sense of autonomy. And I was like, well, that monitoring must affect the sense of autonomy. And it's just this question that I found interesting. And it never in a million years that I ever thought I was going to study, spend 15 years of my life studying truck driving. And it was if you were to map out a career path in academia or research, you would do none of the things that I did that many people advise me against. Where you can't go spend a year working as a truck driver, that's crazy. Or you can't spend all this time trying to write one huge book. And
By the way, if I could just interrupt, what was the fire that got you to take the leap and go and work as a truck driver and go interview truck drivers? This is what a lot of people would be incapable of doing. Just took that leap. What the heck is up with your mind that allowed you to take that big leap?
So I think it's probably Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. I think as a teenager, I sort of adopted some sense of needing to, heroically go out in the world and which I've done at various points in my life, in looking back in absolutely stupid ways. That where I could have completely ended up dead and traumatized my family, including I took a couple week trip in the Pacific, a solo trip on a kayak, and basically my kayaking experience up till that point had been on a fairly calm lake and class 1 rapids
Solo trip on a kayak in the Pacific.
Yeah. So I was working on forestry issues, and we were starting a campaign up in really remote British Columbia. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to work on this, I've got to actually go there myself and see what this is all about, and see whether it's worth devoting my sort of life right now to. And just drove up there with this kayak and put into the Pacific, and it was insane. The tides are huge, and there was one point in which I was going down a fjord, and two fjords kind of came up, and there was a cross channel. And I had hit the timing completely wrong. And the tide was sort of rushing up rivers in these, two fjords. And then coming through this cross channel and met and created this giant standing wave that I had to paddle through. And now, actually, very recently, I've gone out on whitewater with some people who know what the hell they're doing. Mm-hmm. And I realized just how absolutely stupid and ill fit I was. But that's just, I think I've always had that.
Were you afraid when you had that wave before you?
That wave scared the shit out of me. Yeah.
Okay. What about taking a leap and becoming a trucker?
Yeah, there was some nervousness for sure. I mean, I guess my advantage as an ethnographer is I grew up in a blue collar environment. Again, all my ancestors were factory workers, so I can move through spaces. I feel I can become comfortable in lots and lots of places, not everywhere, but, along class lines for sort of white, even white ethnic workers, like that's, I can move in those spaces fairly easily. I mean, not entirely. There was one time where I was like, okay, and I grew up around people who worked on cars. I'd been to drag races and NASCAR, and I'd been to, Colgate University. And I think that was probably my initial training was, being this just working class kid who ends up in this, sort of blue blood, small liberal arts college, and just feeling like, both having the entire world opened up to me, like philosophy and Buddhism and things that I had never heard of, and just became totally obsessed with, and just like, just following my interests.
But also culturally, perhaps didn't feel like you fit in.
Feeling like just a fish out of water. I just, and at the same time that, sort of drove me in the sense that it drove an opening of my mind because I couldn't understand it. I was like, I didn't know that this world existed. I don't understand. And I think maybe that's where my real first step in trying to understand other people, because they were my friends, I mean, they were my teammates. I played lacrosse in college. So like, I was close to people who came from such different backgrounds than I did. And I was so confused, And so I think I learned to learn. And then, sort of went from there.
And then develop your fascination with people. And the funny thing is, you went from trucking now to autonomous trucks. I mean, speaking of not being able to connect the dots, and, your life in the next 10 years could take very interesting directions that very difficult to. First of all, us meeting is a funny little thing, given the things I'm working on with robots currently. But, it may not relate to trucks at all. There's at a certain point, autonomous trucks are just robots. And then it starts getting into a conversation about the roles of robots in society.
Yeah.
And the roles of humans and robots. And that interplay is right up your alley.
Yeah.
As somebody who deeply cares about humans and have somehow found himself studying robots.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I mean, even 4 or 5 years ago, I would, if you had asked me if I was going to be studying trucking still, I would have said no. Yeah. And so my advice is, I think if I was going to give advice, is, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You just got to follow what interests you, and I think we downplay, right, that when we talk to, kids, especially, if you have some bright, gifted kid that gets identified as like, oh, you could go somewhere, then we're like, we feed them stuff. You're like, well, learn the piano and learn another language, right? Or learn robotics. And then we tell other kids like, oh, learn a trade, like figure out what's going to pay well. And not that there's anything against trades. I think everyone should learn like manual skills to make things. I think it's incredibly satisfying and wonderful. And we need more of that. But also, tell, all kids, it's okay to like take a class in something random that you don't think you're going to get any economic return on. Because maybe you will end up going into a trade, but that class that you took in studio art is going to mean that, you look at buildings differently, right? Or you end up sort of putting your own stamp on, woodworking, I think that's the key is like follow, I mean, it's cheesy because everybody says follow your passion, but we say that, and then we just, the 90% of what people hear is, what's the return on investment for that? It's like, you're a human being. Like things interest you, music interests you, literature interests you, video games interest you, like follow it.
Yeah, go grab a kayak and go into the Pacific.
Go do something real. No, don't do that. That was really
go do something stupid and something you'll regret a lot later.
My poor mother. Thank God she didn't know.